So this Peishan limited question is quite a big 32 marker that came from the ACCN4 paper. So this is the old management accounting paper, so equivalent to paper 2 these days. So it's all about a company that manufactures rugs, and they've given us some details of their overheads and some details of the different departments within the organisation. And what they're asking us to do, task 1, this is as far as we're going to go, this 16 mark part today, calculate the overhead absorption rate, OAR, for each production department, stating the bases used and why. And no clue really as to how we're going to get there. So let's just read the information and see what we can remember about overhead absorption costing. So it says that they own a large factory. They manufacture 2 types of rug, plain and patterned. The factory has 2 production departments. So remember, these are the ones that are actually doing anything. So these are the production departments here, the cutting and assembly department, and 2 service departments. So these are the service departments, the canteen and maintenance. And they're service departments because they provide services to the whole organisation. But remember that when we're trying to calculate overhead absorption rates, we need to calculate all the overheads for each of these departments, so these the production departments, and then choose the most appropriate basis to share those overheads out amongst units of output. So that could be on the basis of machine hours or labour hours. So machine hours if it's more machine intensive, which clearly the cutting department is, and labour hours if the process that takes place in that department is more labour intensive, which in this case is going to be the case because labour hours are much higher in assembly than the machine hours are. It tells us that the rugs are produced in batches and that they operate over 13 periods a year. The budgeted overheads for the factory for periods 1 to 3, so this is a 12-week period, were as follows. So we've got a whole list of different overheads there, which we're going to have to either allocate if something belongs directly to one department. So we can see here, assembly department repairs can be directly allocated into the assembly department, and so can the cutting department repairs. They can be allocated. But everything else here is going to have to be apportioned or shared amongst these different departments. So there's going to be 2 stages to this. The first one is to share all of these overheads out amongst the 4 departments. And then what we're going to have to do is reapportion the overheads, because at the end we only want to be left with overheads in these 2 departments, in cutting and assembly, because the service departments aren't producing any units of output. Therefore, we can't attach their overheads to anything coming out of that department. So we can't add canteen overheads, crank it up to a portion of chips or whatever it is they're producing, because they're not producing any products, any units of output for the business. So we're going to be reapportioning the maintenance department overheads using these percentages. And then once we've done that, we'll be left with some canteen overheads. So we'll need to reapportion those on that basis. Now, what we're given here is some ideas for ways that we could share out some of these overheads. So as I've already mentioned, we were going to be able to directly allocate assembly and cutting costs here to the relevant department. We won't need to share those at all. But factory rent, we're going to need to find the most appropriate basis from this list. Now, can I just warn you that we are never going to use machine hours or labour hours for apportioning any overheads. These are only used right at the end. So save those until the end. Do not be tempted to use those as a way of apportioning overheads. It's not appropriate. Machine hours is not an appropriate way of apportioning, for example, machine depreciation, and labour hours is not an appropriate way to apportion staff costs. Okay, so take it from me, you won't need those until the very end. Now, these 3 are going to be useful to us. So when it comes to the machine depreciation, the net book value is going to be the most appropriate way to share those overheads. Number of employees is going to relate to our staff costs. So we can put that in there. And then the factory rent, clearly the most appropriate way of sharing that out is going to be on the basis of floor area. Okay, so what I've done is taken the liberty of preparing a little schedule just to make sure that my workings are a little bit neater, because they can tend to get a bit disorganised, a bit chaotic. In the exam, you would be given some space to do this, probably some columns just to try and keep your workings neat so that people have got a fighting chance of marking your work when it gets to the end. So I've already drawn up this list. So all I've got here is the overhead. So this is the overhead that we were given up here. So this is the list of overheads that all need to be allocated or apportioned between those departments. So we've got £4,187,250 worth, and we're going to be sharing that out. So I can put those, well, I could put the totals in. I haven't put the totals in at the moment, but the assembly department repairs, cutting department repairs, the rent, and the staff costs, and also the machine depreciation. So 5 different costs there. And then I've put in some space here for reapportionment of the maintenance and the canteen. So what we're going to be doing here is something called the step down method, because we're going to be stepping down until we've got all of the overheads concentrated just between the cutting and the assembly department. Okay, so just a reminder then about how we apportion. So, well, actually, let's do the direct allocation first. So the assembly department repairs, we can put those, so assembly department repairs can go straight in. Let me just make sure that you can see this. 101, 250 can go straight into the assembly department column. We can do the same for the cutting department repairs. Let's just give myself some space here. So £36,000 can go straight in to the cutting department. So that's what we call direct allocation. We don't have to share them because those overheads, the name of the department is mentioned there in the overhead. That's how you know to allocate it directly rather than apportion it. Now the factory rent, the floor area, we're going to share £1,470,000 worth. Now, can I suggest we get rid of the zeros, because otherwise we're going to be here all day bashing those into our calculator. What we need to do is find the total floor area first of all. So if we add 18, again, we can get rid of the zeros, 63, 3 and 6. It's going to give us 90,000 square meters of floor space. Okay, so what that means is that the cutting department is going to get 18 over 90 times the 1470. So 18, oops, let's put my calculator here so you can see it. 18 over 90, so simple fractions here, times 1470, so 20% of it is going to be 294,000. So the cutting department is getting £294,000 worth. Okay, the assembly department is 63 over 90, so 63 over 90. So 70% times 1470 is 1,029,000 going into the assembly department. Canteen 3 over 90 times the 1470 is 49,000. And the maintenance department 6 over 90, so it's going to be twice as much as the canteen department, times 1470 is £98,000. Okay, so that's the process. We're going to do exactly the same thing with the staff costs. So that's going to be on the basis of number of employees. So if we add those up, 50 plus 150 plus 10 plus 30 means that we've got 240 employees in total. So 50 of those 240 are working in the cutting department. So 50 over 240 times, because we've already done that one, let's tick it off, times the 1.2 million means that we're going to get £250,000 worth of staff costs going into the cutting department. 150 of the 240 times the 1200, so 750,000 is going into the assembly department. Canteen is only 10 employees, so 10 divided by 240 times the 1.2 million is 50,000. Feel free to skip through this if you've got the idea and you just want to see what happens at the end. It's quite a lengthy process. 30 out of 240 work in the maintenance department, so 1.2 million. So that means we've got 150,000 in there. Okay, so last one to do then is machine depreciation. We're going to be doing that on the basis of the net book value. So again, let's get rid of the zeros and just work on the whole numbers there. So 300 plus 800 plus 20 plus 80 is 1200. So 300 over 1200 times by the 1380 means we've got 345,000 going into the into the cutting department. Then we can do 800 over 1200 times 1380. So we're going to put 920,000 into the assembly department. Canteen, then machinery is 80. Oh, that's maintenance, sorry. Canteen is 20 over 1200 times by the 1380. Means that they're going to get 23,000 in there. And then the maintenance department is, what we're doing, net book value of machinery, 80 over 1200 times by the 1380 Okay, so I've finished apportioning all of the overheads. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pause the video while I add these totals up. In true Blue Peter styling, here's one that I made earlier. So as I said, we've finished either allocating or apportioning all of the overheads. And now all I've done is subtotaled them. So I've got a total for the cutting department, the assembly, the canteen, and the maintenance. But I can't go on and calculate the overhead absorption rate because remember that these two departments aren't production departments. So they're not producing any units of output to which we can attach overheads. So what we've got to do now is reapportion maintenance. So what we're going to do is take out 340. So the total of the maintenance, 340,000, is going 50% into cutting, 40% into assembly. And it's told us these figures here down at the bottom, 50, 40, and 10. So we're going to 40% is going to assembly and 10% to the canteen department. So that's quite easy. 34,000 going in there. 50% is going to be 170,000, and then the other 40% will be 136,000. So we've just reapportioned maintenance. So maintenance is all gone now. That's been reapportioned. Now what we need to do is just subtotal the canteen. So add the 122 and the 34 together. So we've got 156,000 now in the canteen department, and we're going to have to reapportion that 25% to cutting and 75% to the assembly department. So we're taking that out there, 156,000 being taken out of canteen and reapportioned, so 25% of that. So we've got 39,000 going into cutting and 117,000 going into assembly. So we can now add these totals up. So we've got 925 plus 170 plus 39. So we've got 1,134,000 in the cutting department. And we've got 2,800,250 plus 136,000 plus 117,000. We've got a total of 3,053,250. Now it's quite useful at this point just to add those two figures together and just make sure 4,187,250 is the total of the overheads. You haven't gained any, you haven't lost any. If the total doesn't agree, then you know that you've done something wrong. So you need to just go back and check this line by line. First of all, check that it adds up across. So the factory rent does actually add up to whatever you were given, 1,470,000 and so on. If that's all okay, or if it's not okay, then recheck it. If it doesn't add up, it's probably because you've miscalculated something here. So just go back and check that. If all else fails, just try the adding up. But don't go any further until you've sorted that out. Now, the next thing we're asked to do, if you remember, so that's all of that page dealt with. But what we've been asked to do is calculate the overhead absorption rate using calculate the overhead absorption rate for each production department. So that's only these two, cutting and assembly, using the most appropriate bases and explaining why. Now, the reason we're going to choose either machine hours or labour hours is quite simply whichever one is the higher of the two. So for the production department, we are going to use machine hours. Now, we're not going to say, so we're going to use machine hours for the production. So you can't see that. Machine hours for production is 47,250. And you're going to say, when you're asked why, 47, I can't talk and write at the same time, 47,200, what was it, 47,250 hours. We're going to use that because it's more machine intensive. Okay, so this is for the production department, the cutting department. And the assembly department, it's obviously more labour intensive. We're going to use labour hours because that is the higher of the two. So labour hours in the assembly department is 44,250 compared with only 20,000 odd machine hours. So it's obviously more labour intensive. So that's the reason why. That's how we're explaining it. So what's the number there? It was 44,250 hours. So all we're going to do then is divide the cutting department overheads. Probably should have some pound signs at the bottom here. So if we divide that by the 47,250, so 1134,000 divided by 47,250 is £24 per machine hour. And if we divide the 3,053,250 by the 44,250, that's £69 per labour hour. Okay, so that's how we do task one. That's how we do the overhead apportionment side of things. Second part of this question is to calculate the budgeted selling price of each rug. So we've got the overhead absorption rates. Now what this actually means, just to recap on this, that every machine hour that's worked in the cutting department is going to accumulate an extra £24 of overheads. Okay, and in the assembly department, every labour hour, in addition to the staff costs and all the other costs, is going to attract £69 worth of overheads. Okay, so if we have a look at this now then, how we're going to calculate the budgeted selling price, it's given us some information. It's telling us about how long each of these products takes to make. So a plain rug takes 70 minutes in the cutting department, 30 minutes in the assembly department. That's in terms of machine hours, but in labour hours, it takes 40 minutes in labour time in cutting and 50 minutes in assembly. And it also uses 3 meters of material. The patterned rug, the same for cutting and assembly. So the machine hours are no different, but the labour hours, it's obviously a bit more labour intensive. In the assembly department, it takes 80 minutes to make a patterned rug rather than 50 minutes for a plain. And it also takes more material. So the plain rug uses 3 meters, the patterned rug uses 3.3 meters. So it tells us that the workforce in both departments will be paid £7 per labour hour. Obviously, we have an issue with that these days because that's below the minimum and living wage amounts, but we won't quibble about that. This is an old question. The material will cost £20 a metre, and the selling price for each rug is based on its full production cost. So that includes the overheads plus 40%. So they're using cost plus pricing. They're taking the full production cost, so the cost of the materials, the cost of the labour, and then the cost of the overheads as well, and then adding a markup of 40%. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just run through one of them. I think will probably be enough if we do the plain rug. So for a plain rug, let's start with the materials. So the materials, it tells us, my desk's very wobbly, it's going to be 3 meters, and it tells us that the materials are £20. So 3 lots of £20 is £60. Okay, it's going to take labour now. Excuse me. The labour, it takes 40 minutes in the cutting department, and it takes 50 minutes in the assembly department. Now, all of these people are paid £7 an hour. If the rates were different for each department, we would need to work it out separately, but they're not. So it's going to be 90 over 60, so 1.5 hours times £7, which by my reckoning will be £10.50. So 90 over 60, let's just check that. I am on holiday mode at the moment, so anything could happen. Yep, £10.50 in labour. Now we're going to have overheads, and we've got 2 lots of overheads to consider. So we've got the cutting department. It takes 70 minutes, so 70 over 60 times the overhead absorption rate that we've just calculated here for the cutting department, which was £24 per machine hour. So cutting department overheads are based on machine hours, so it's 70 minutes there. Okay, so 70 over 60 times 24 is £28 an hour, £28 per rug. And then for the assembly department, if you remember, we based it on labour hours. So we need to find out what the labour hours are in the assembly department. So it's 50 minutes. So for assembly, it's going to be 50 over 60 times the overhead absorption rate. That's £69 we came to. So £69 per labour hour. And I think this is the complicated bit. This is where people tend to go wrong, I think, in this exam. So 50 over 60 times 69. It's getting in a model with so £57 and 50p, I think, is the answer for that one. Let's just check. Yep, £57.50. So if we add all of that up, 60 plus £10.50 plus 28 plus £57.50, we get a total cost of £156. So that's the full production cost, the full absorption cost of a plain rug. £156. We're adding the markup. It's cost plus pricing, which is 40%. So times 40%, £62.40. And then if we add those two together, the selling price, make sure it's still on the screen, is going to be £218.40. Okay, so you can do exactly the same process with the patterned rug. So for doing the overhead part, obviously the materials and the labour is pretty straightforward. You can add the labour together. It's 120 minutes, so it's going to be 2 hours of labour. Be careful with the materials. It's an extra 0.3 of a metre. When it comes to the overheads, it's going to be based on the 70 minutes in the cutting department again. So the overheads in the cutting department will be exactly the same as for a plain rug. But in the assembly department, remember, it takes 80 minutes rather than 50. So it's going to be 80 over 60 times the £69 down here. So that will be the difference. So hopefully you can check out the answer there. The last little bit of this was explaining two benefits to Peishan of using activity-based costing to calculate the selling price. So things like batch size would be taken into account, so it might be more accurate. And we may have because we're using cost pools rather than just these four departments, we may have a less arbitrary way of sharing out the overhead, so it then may lead to more accuracy. If we're asked for downsides, we're not in this question, but the major downside with activity-based costing is it is unduly complicated. So yes, we are using arbitrary methods to allocate and apportion overheads here, but it's fairly straightforward. It's easy to understand. If we get involved in activity-based costing, it's quite a great deal more complicated. So hopefully that's given you an idea of Peishan. I know somebody requested this, and I'm sorry I can't remember your name, but hopefully that's helped. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and watch out for future releases. Thanks for watching.